welcome to Lorena's Labyrinth today. Thank you for returning if you're a returning visitor. If you're a newbie, please be aware that you've actually come to a video in the middle of a whole delivery. This is like a workshop, really. So I would recommend that you look at some of our other content in the numerology channel and go through them one by one before coming back to this one. But either way, today what we're looking at is the implications of the number 5 on the birth chart and what it's going to mean for the individual. And we're going to close up because I've decided to, rather than explore a famous person today as an example of what a birth chart might look like, I've actually decided to use the birthday of one of my grandchildren, because they have a master 2911, and of course that carries some really interesting influences, shall we say, that I find supports my beliefs in numerology, and that I'd concluded before her birth. Anyway, cracking along. So the number 5 as an odd number is considered to be a masculine number energetically, and it's associated with the colour of gold. It's situated, as you see on the birth chart, in the centre of the spiritual plane, or the higher self plane, and it's associated with the spiritual aspects of love and freedom of expression. Now, because of its placement, there can never ever actually be an isolated 5, so we're not going to see it. So the other thing about it is that it governs the intensity of human feelings like no other number on the birth chart, and it is actually connected to the heart chakra. And as I said, it symbolises love and freedom of both emotional and artistic expression. So for the person with a single 5 on their birth chart, as I said, because it's central, there is this additional capacity of a balanced personality. It ensures that the person's got a level of emotional control that allows for the development of relatively reliable intuitive guidance and an enhanced ability to respond to situations and challenges in positive and creative ways. And now this is a real asset for them, because the alternative to being able to respond emotionally in a creative sense is this ongoing series of emotional reactiveness or potential roller coastering. So a person with a single 5 has got a greater level of emotional stability as compared to those of us without a 5, unless it's in the ruling number or compensated elsewhere in their birth chart and the influences of their birth. Certainly within the context of addressing adversity and this business of turning challenges into positive situations, they have this inherent ability, if you like, to find the silver lining in every cloud. And this is about positive thought. It indicates within itself there's a certain character strength there, and not just strength but resilience. And because this 5 is on the spiritual plane as well, there's a heightened sense of compassion associated with the number. So with people who've got this single 5, they're going to exhibit a love of freedom, and there will be a natural or inherent ability for them to be able to not only understand their own emotions and responses, but also to a large extent to understand other people's emotional responses and what motivates them. And it's because of this they are able to extend compassion, feel compassion, and hold empathy towards these other people as well, even during conflicting situations. Where there's 2 5s on the birth chart, this is rather interesting as a combination goes, because often they're perceived by other people to have this really driving intensity about them, and often they have a powerful staring, furrowed eyebrows kind of thing. There's this intense determination that radiates off them, and it gives the appearance of confidence and self-assurance, and probably more than they actually do carry, because quite often these people will also struggle because they have this intensity of emotion. So they will actually struggle a little bit more, potentially have to address family and work related problems that will emerge in their lives periodically, and that will be particularly challenging to them, because there may be a risk that they'll magnify these problems to be larger than they actually are. Stumbling over my words here. What else? There can be a tendency to dramatize problems when there's 2 5s on the birth chart. And it's because of this tendency to dramatize, it can lead to misunderstandings with others. And within these situations, there is a risk that they're going to be perceived to be overbearing or domineering on occasions. What else? They may have tendencies to create a bit of emotional turmoil, not just for their own internal workings, but it may actually spill out towards the people in their environment around them. They would be encouraged to address this, because if they don't actually address it, they're going to be at higher risk of developing disorders and health issues of the ulcer, of stomach ulcers or indigestion. Gosh, what is the word? I'm struggling to think of it at the moment. The digestive tract, they may end up with those kind of health issues unless they can get a handle on this emotional intensity that happens for them. I mean, realistically, people might not even be aware that they're developing digestive problems, because they might become so what's the word? Goodness me, my brain is struggling today. They may fall into that pattern of minimizing, where it's not just a case of, I've got issues with my digestive tract because, I'm struggling with my emotional management. Instead of facing it, it might just be like, oh, I've got some random intestinal gas problems, or I suffer from constipation or a distended stomach or whatever. I mean, it could even be that diverticulosis or whatever it's called. They might suffer from those kind of things as well. So they really need to take additional care as far as the emotional management goes, because if they don't, not only is there risk with the digestive tract, there is also the risk that they may actually become dependent on substances or even sex, some of the addictive type behaviours, as a part of releasing this pent-up emotion. Because where the single 5 has the emotional balance attached to it, the 2 tends to bring into play the negative qualities, the imbalance, I suppose, for want of a better description, the internalizing of emotion as opposed to releasing them. And because there is this love of freedom and that kind of thing, it just gets internalized, I guess. So finding a healthy emotional release for these emotions is going to be a primary aim for these people. They would be guided to do that. And then there's also this matter of, instead of using substances perhaps or unhealthy activities as part of the emotional release, to learn the strategies of perhaps meditation, particularly related to the eating stuff. They might actually be well encouraged to focus on doing things like mindful eating techniques, or to explore things like calming herbal teas. And I realise that there are some people in the world that call it herbal teas. Well, I'm Australian, we call it herbs, okay? So they might be wanting a herbal tea. So the issues of the 2 5s are compounded when there's 3 5s on the birth chart. This emotional intensity of the individual can be really difficult for not just the person with the 3 5s, but also those people around them. And thankfully, there's very few individuals that carry this particular number sequence, because those who do, basically it infers there's a lot of karma that needs to unfold, and it can happen in interesting ways. So for parents of children who have got this sequence, which I'd be pretty surprised. I don't think there would be too many of them. I'm just thinking maybe the 5th of May 2005 might have been one, and then in 2015, 15th of May 2005. I'm just thinking out loud. I don't think there would be too many people that have got this sequence, and as we say, that's very fortunate. So parents of children with this sequence, they've got some additional responsibilities as well. And the issues are that quite often the parents are not equipped to be able to manage these responsibilities. And they can also become overwhelmed and feel lost in understanding the emotional complexities of these children. The experience of raising a child with this combination can be truly educational and a learning experience just for the parents themselves. And their primary challenge will be able to help the child to learn to think before speaking and acting, and to develop this practice of wisdom. And it's by taking the time to think first, they'll avoid offending other people and other people's sensitivities and egocentrism. So egocentrism creates a barrier and a buffer between people with the 3 5s and others, and they can become egocentric themselves, using that as a really big boundary or barrier, if you like, around them to protect themselves. Because obviously, the issue is that if we run around offending people all the time, then people tend to react back at us. And for these people with the 555, they become quite sensitized and fearful of offending people. And so it's just safer for them to put this barrier around themselves and to exclude themselves socially. And all this does is actually compound and foster feelings of isolation, exclusion, and unhappiness. So the challenge for the parents is to work with them to really help them manage their expression, their verbal expression, their written expression, and to be able to express in healthy ways and sensitive ways, and encourage probably relationship health and communication skills. There's plenty of courses out there. I'm just sort of thinking to myself what I would recommend for people with one of these children. Probably any strategy that involves emotional regulation and developing personal and self-awareness, as well as learning to communicate and express their emotions, starting as early as possible for healthy problem resolution strategy. Negotiating conflict, that's the word I'm looking for. That would be what I would be working with a young kiddie to try and get them to do, as I say, sooner rather than later. And that might mean the parents have got to go off and do a bit of training themselves. So if we thought the 3 5s was going to be a bit difficult, for parents of a child with 4 5s, it's probably going to be a lot more difficult, or certainly the child with the 4 5s, 4 number 5s on the birth chart, is going to potentially find it quite overwhelming, or they will find their emotions to be quite overwhelming. Now, I must point out at this point too, don't forget that when we have these things, we don't read the chart as standalone. There's going to be other factors that come into this, and you'd like to think that anybody with 4 5s on their chart has got things like arrows on the birth chart, or a very calming kind of ruling number, or day numbers, or the name influences, paying attention to the names to try and get some of this balance back in to the overall picture. Because if we were just looking at this standalone, we would be thinking, the 4 5s means this poor child is going to, human adult, is going to experience some really overwhelming emotional intensity, be highly sensitive, highly stressed, and because of the distractions, because of the stress, they're going to, based on the numbers, most likely experience anxiety. They may actually be accident prone because they get distracted by their emotions, especially if life has led them down a pathway where they made, I wouldn't say a wrong decision, but they made perhaps an unhealthy choice. They were offered that fork in the road and they took the hard one. Life can be really difficult for these people until they learn to follow their guidance and to direct their activities and actions. And to do this, they really need to take a firm hand on their emotions and learn to respond to stress and distress, and focus on that creativity as opposed to the reactions. And to do this, they're going to have to really learn to draw on those personal skills, that self-discipline of being mindful, being present, by being in the here and now, and not allowing themselves to jump ahead in their mind to what's happening down the future. So basically, once again, responsibility does fall onto parents. But I want to say, parents, if this is one of your children, parenting only goes so far with it. Parents' job is to get children to grow up to be adults. Once the child is an adult, then they make choices themselves. And so if an adult is listening to this and you've got four fives on your chart, now today is the day that you can start to make change. And it's going to take a bit of effort and a bit of self-discipline most likely, but you will get there. So today, instead of looking at a famous person, I actually decided to do a birth chart on somebody that I know and where there's not going to be any threat or risk associated with disclosing too much information here. This birth chart, which is based on the birthday 27th of August 2019, shows you the kinds of charts that we're looking at for young people in this demographic. And as you can see by looking at the chart, there's a number of standout features. We've got the middle row line, actually column, that's the word I'm looking for, the middle column of blank numbers. That becomes an arrow, and that is what we call the arrow of frustrations. And when you have this column that is free of any numbers, that indicates that the person is going to struggle with frustration. They tend to have, by at least in my experience, when you meet people as adults with this particular column, they have pretty high principles and values, not necessarily that they can live by them, but this is this business of mind of, they believe in right and wrong, and the right way of doing things should be X and Y. And they try to live by those values. But more importantly, if other people don't live by their values, they can become very judgmental and frustrated and disappointed at them, So generally the advice for people with this arrow of frustrations is to release expectation, to hold hope. So this is what a parent would be teaching the child, to stop having expectations of other people and learn to accept people for who they are. That doesn't mean to say that, they should be allowing themselves to go into unhealthy situations. Of course, they've got to make the healthy choices still, but not to personalise and expect too much from others. That's the key message for people with the arrow of frustrations. Now, the other one's an interesting one. This is called the arrow of activity, and that indicates a personality that is very, very active. They're unlikely to be able to sit still. So, as I just said, I'm just describing what we've got here on the charts. Now, the other thing with this birthday, we've got 2 2s on here, which is indicative of a heightened compassion, highly intuitive. So they would go through life, there would be a balance there where they can see past the facade that people put up, They'll be able to, certainly to some extent, be able to do pretty good character assessments. This is, as a rule, these are generalist things. Even if they don't turn around and make a negative judgment of a person, they probably would, have an understanding that all's not kosher, for want of a better word. But at the same time, when we talk about heightened sensitivity, this includes not just the intuitive and being able to see past the BS that's out there, but also heightened levels of kindness, shall we say. They're probably more compassionate than the average Joe. So we look at those things, and we can see here on this chart, if we look at the planes, there's pretty much a balance here. So this 9 indicates that the person is a thinker. They're going to be quite analytical. They're going to be spiritually quite well-rounded, because that's the higher self business. When we've got the number 3 is fairly comprehensive. It's a good number to have there, basically. And then when you see the 8 on the physical plane, the doing plane, that does suggest the person actually will be able to manifest reasonably well by putting in the hard work that's required. Now, once again, we're talking about the potential here of numbers on the chart. And once again, I mentioned that we never ever, if we're doing a numerology report or looking at a person's chart, just go basically off what these numbers are. And of course, just to be clear, I'm abbreviating things here. Other things that come into play, the other primary kind of influences for a person beyond the birth chart is their ruling number. And this is one of the reasons why I've chosen to use this birth date today. And as I said, it belongs to somebody that I know quite well. So we'll be discussing that as we go along. But anyway, so there's the birth chart. We'd look at that. We'd have a look at the ruling number. Now, this is where I think it gets interesting, especially in accordance with the fact that I know this person. We've got here the influences of the sun sign, which is Virgo, of course. Now, we know that Virgos, this will actually compound, I believe, the arrow of frustrations and expectations and the idealism, the perfectionism, because these are traits associated with the Virgo, and Virgos, in my experience, really like to have some order. There may be, I find it funny, okay, so I'll just give you a bit of a thing here. Back in the day, I, of course, am Leo, Virgo, cusp sign, and for me, my idea of an orderly house was to have free bench space, but if you open the cupboards, certainly in the kitchen area, all the Tupperware might fall out, and people were like, how can you live like this? And it's like, well, it's behind a closed door. For a Virgo, they cannot have a door that you open, like the kitchen. I'm thinking of one Virgo in particular. Her trait was she couldn't cope with the opening of doors and having opening of cupboard doors and having stuff fall out. For her, she had to have everything in these boxes, and her house was completely cluttered. But she would say it's not cluttered because everything's in boxes, because she was sorting out so it could go in the cupboard in the right place. I'm just like, I don't know how you can live like this with all this stuff over your surfaces. So there we've got an example of traits. So this is what I mean when I talk about this little person, because obviously they were born in 2019. They're not at that stage yet as far as clutter and organisation goes. But I would imagine down the track that there will be ordered chaos for her because she's so active anyway. I should have said this is a little girl, but now you know, and it's my granddaughter we're talking about. Okay, so we've discussed the sun sign business. We're going to talk about the day number, which is the secondary path. This is a 9. That would exhibit to me that she has the potential for a great focus of attention. People with 9s have the potential to become a visionary and see spirits. Now, I would be very surprised if she couldn't and didn't, because of course it runs in the family. Her mother could do it too, and of course her grandmother can, and I question whether or not there's a hereditary factor there. So I'm not going to go too far into the 9 because of time restrictions, shall we say. I'm going to talk about the 29 and the influences on the life path here. Now, many years ago, I knew a guy, and he had his own shop business, if you like, and he used to sell crystals. So a lot of his client base, if not all of them, were actually spiritual. And it was quite common for us to, just for rule of thumb, to have a chat and say, what's your birthday? And then do a little bit of analysis. I and he would do it together. And he was the first person to point out to me that in his experience, after many years of having his business, that he would find people come to the premises and they would have a ruling number of a 2911. And he was the one that said to me, he believes, this may not be very subtle if you're a 2911, sorry about that, it'll make sense in a minute. He was the one that said to me that he believed that people that were born with a 2911 actually came into this world with a bit of a chip on their shoulder. And I was like, can you explain? Because I actually have a sister with a day number of a 2911. That might fit, actually. But he said, no, in his experience, when they've got a ruling number, they tend to have something that, rationally would feel like a bit of a burden and create a bit of resentment from birth, depending on the personality. And it was usually potentially a disability or something like that, a disability across the life path. Now, as time has gone by, I can see the links and I can see why he would say that. So where I'm going with this is, while the 2911 is a master number, of course, and the potential that is indicated through this ruling number is that at some point this little girl, my granddaughter, will be a teacher and she will be teaching from lived experience. Does she have a disability? Actually, she does. She was born not with something that physically impedes her. Currently, there's no intellectual disability. And I say currently because what she's got is a condition called PKU. It's a very long word, just Google it because I can never pronounce it anyway. But what it means is that she can't eat protein. And so she has got a very, very adjusted diet. People with her condition, they have to be very, very careful during their formative years, up until their brain is fully formed, that they don't, or that they have this very adjusted diet, because the brain, their personal body can't break this protein down. And what ends up happening is a number of other symptoms. If they eat the protein, they end up with an intellectual disability. So they have to have dietary adjustments and special dietary food that comes to them. Her mother gets it delivered from the hospital and that kind of stuff. And this is across the life path as far as I know. Sorry, I needed to swallow and have a cough. So anyway, where I'm going with this is I can understand, putting this into perspective with my granddaughter, that there is a risk that she may actually develop a real grudge going forward, because you can imagine the instruction is from birth that they're told we can't eat their food or we will get sick, and they can't eat our food because they will get sick, which is quite true, by the way. And their food is disgusting, okay? It stinks, it's foul. And I often feel sorry for her, at the thought that we're sitting around the table eating real tasty food. And it's kind of like, well, here's your very limited diet, because think about this. If you can't eat protein, there's many vegetables that you can't eat. You can't eat lentils, you can't eat meat, you can't eat eggs, you can't eat cheese. Interestingly, they can eat almost as much lollies and sugar and fruit as they like, because there's no protein in either of them. But yeah, it's like all the fun stuff they're not allowed to do. And then being a little one and having cousins and that kind of stuff, you could imagine family gatherings when other people want to eat real food, because you have to carry on as normal. It's like everybody's kind of watching her. The poor little thing is so watched. It's like she's got her eyeball on a prawn, can somebody stop, quick, grab the prawns, So she's not allowed to taste them, because otherwise she'll develop a real taste for them. So that's where I say, there is a potential that later on as an adult that she might become resentful that she's missed out on so much of the fun stuff as she's growing up, and also because she's been so watched over by so many people. So that's part of it. But what I decided to do, just for something different for these activities, is I decided to have a look at her karma, her karmic path, because it's like, well, I haven't done this for any of the videos so far. So what does the karma say, because I know her birth number, birth time, which is important for calculating karma and what they're supposed to experience during the life path. So basically, when I look at her karma, what she's supposed to learn for this lifetime, it's a process of transformation and regeneration throughout the entirety of her life, with many changes to bring her through to the next phase of her life. And it says, when I was looking at it, it's much like a rebirth. So there's going to be a constant renewal around this little girl as she goes through her life, while she also steps into her own personal power to create positive change for the good of humanity. It does say that, metaphorically speaking, people on the karmic path that she has, this is when they live positively, has the capacity to turn a desert into an oasis. And it's an extremely powerful one once they've mastered it. Of course, there are other things involved here, which, because you've got choices, everybody's got choices. If a person fails to utilize the power of the number, then the power is wasted, is basically where we're going. It also is a case of use it or lose it is one of the other key methods for her path time. And if she doesn't use it, obviously there's always a polar opposite, which is that unless she steps into her power, then there's a chance that she will become disempowered and feel victimized by life. So her mother would be well encouraged to help her to develop the traits of being a powerful person, to avoid falling into these traps of feeling victimization, and to learn self-discipline. Now, this is going to be a massive challenge for her mum. Okay, I know this because I know this little girl. Because one of the symptoms of this condition, of course, and just think about this, is one, as I said, they can't eat protein. Protein is necessary for the production of the chemical or hormone in the brain called melatonin, which regulates sleep. So a lot of the children that have this condition actually don't sleep very well, and they are I would say this little girl's basically on fire all day, every day, as in busy running around, busy mind, busy thinker, strong little personality as well. She doesn't put up with nonsense. She'll put you in your place from 3 years old if she thinks you're doing the wrong thing. So yeah, she has to learn to stand up and basically put into practice look, there's some other quotes that are involved with her karmic path, which is God helps those who help themselves. So it is a mastery of self. She has to help herself. She has to learn to direct her energy into positive outcomes and to create positive change. Anyway, I'm going to haul up there because I think it's getting very long. So hopefully today you've enjoyed the content that I've loaded. I'm going to crack on and do the 6 now, ready for you next time. If you haven't seen the previous content, I really do encourage you. I know it's long, it's like watching a workshop, but that is the idea. I'm putting up years, decades, if you like, of study into these videos to share information for you so that you can actually go on and do your own studies and gather your own information. But either way, I'd like to thank you for your participation today. If you like what's happening, please just click the like buttons, make a comment, get us on the YouTube algorithm so that we can get the content out to more people. And I wish you very well for today. Take care. I'll catch you on the next video. Bye-bye for now.